We'll begin tonight's meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance with the invocation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, everybody nod their head. Yeah, I gotta let my dad know to nod his head because the nurse got him watching me right now. Oh, Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you so much, Lord, for all of us here tonight, Lord. Bless my father, Lord. Touch him right now as he look upon me tonight, Lord. Bless every city councilman here to make the right decision tonight, Lord. Bless our audience, Lord, for our great city of Lima. We will continue to strive in a great situation in our city, Lord. We're going to continue moving in the right direction, Lord. Just keep our power of minds together here at this city council here and allow us to move in the direction we need to be moving in. In Jesus Christ's name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Gordon?
Here.
Mr. McLean?
Here.
Mr. Lowe?
Here.
Mr. Tebbett?
Here.
Miss Adams? Here. Mr. Glenn?
Here.
Mrs. Miles?
Here.
Mr. Nixon?
Here. We have 3 public hearings this evening. The first public hearing is regarding the rezoning at 1008, 1012, 1014, 1028, and 1034 West Market Street. Petition 4 by Andy and Shannon Wanamaker. I'll have the clerk read the call.
Notice is hereby given that on November the 9th, 2015 at 7 p.m. in the council chambers, 50 Town Square, Lima, Ohio, a public hearing will be held regarding to modify the applicable city zoning code for parcels located at 1000, 1008, 1012, 1014, 1028, and 1034 West Market Street from residential 3 to office within Lima, Allen County, Ohio. The petition is for existing office uses and special uses. This petition is initiated by Andy and Shannon Wanamaker et al. And has been endorsed by the City Planning Commission. Any person desiring to be heard on said matter may do so at this time and place herein specified. The reports, maps, and other documents pertaining to the above request are on file in the office of the Clerk of Council and are open to public inspection.
Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak to the issue of rezoning the parcels stated on West Market Street from residential 3 to office? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
I'm Shannon Wanamaker, and my husband Andy and I live at 1454 West Market Street, and we are the owners of 1028 West Market Street. And I prepared a packet for each council member. May I approach?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you. So the reason for our rezoning request is that I would like to turn my property at 1028 West Market Street into a private event venue for small businesses and family gatherings, such as fundraisers, birthday and anniversary parties, bridal and baby showers, and intimate weddings. I see this opportunity as not merely a business venture, but a community service. So my goals for this property include, first, sharing one of Lima's most beautiful properties with the public. This home is 137 years old. It is in incredible shape. It has all of the charm and the elegance and the original historic features that you might already expect of a property of this age, and yet so much more. So I gave each of you the photos so that you could see for yourselves, but please also know that I would be thrilled to give you a tour in person, whatever your schedules allow. Second, with this project, I'm hoping to change perceptions about the safety and the quality of homes in the city. And finally, I truly believe that this is an opportunity to promote the preservation of Lima's historic properties, something that both my husband and I are quite passionate about. I also wanted to let you know that Andy and I have been working very closely with Bill Brown and Mike Halsey to create a plan of action that will get us to code. We know that there is a lot to accomplish, but we truly believe in this project, and we believe that it can only enhance the city. And fortunately for us, our neighbors also feel the same way, and some of them are here with us tonight, and we are so grateful for their support. But thank you, councilors, for your consideration, and if you have any questions, I would be pleased to answer them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to speak to the question of the rezoning? Please come forward, state your name and address.
Hello, I'm Chastity Butterfield. I own 1014 West Market Street, right next door to Jameson Manor, and I just wanted to come and show my support for this evening. I think anything that we can do to clean up the neighborhood and bring people in is going to be a good thing, and they've done an absolutely beautiful job with the house, as you can see. So I see no reason we shouldn't do this, and I hope that you'll support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience? Please come forward and state your name and address.
Linda Mack, 108 East High Street, 414 apartment. I'm just wondering, this sounds like a small, not very big income business is going in here, and I'm just wondering if this is going on the historical record later to be supported by our tax money. And whoever owns the property we support it, and they get the profit. And I'm just wondering, I haven't heard anything more about it, but that's what it sounded like to me when I heard a bunch of small businesses, miscellaneous things here. So I'm just wondering about that. Some of these historical places around town are in very bad shape, and I've seen them coated over. One place especially didn't make it on the historical record because they were caught at it. The big cracks were coated over it, and they are gone.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to speak to the question of rezoning of the specified parcels on West Market Street? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
My name is David Smith, 515 West Ashwood Avenue. I guess this would be a question of law to the law director. It's my understanding under Ohio Revised Code that a property retains its pre-existing use, grandfathered if you will say, and as such, if this is chosen not to be used in the manner in which it's being changed, it can still be used for residential. Isn't that not correct?
It could still be used for residential, yes.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to speak to the issue of the rezoning of 1000 through 134 West Market Street? The third and final call, is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak to the question of the rezoning from residential 3 to office on West Market Street? Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed. The next item is to rezone 1020 West North Street, petitioned for by Lima DOHP XI LLC. Will the clerk read the call?
Notice is hereby given that on November 9th, 2015, at 7 p.m. in the council chambers, 50 Town Square, Lima, Ohio, a public hearing will be held regarding to modify the applicable city zoning code for a parcel located at 1020 West North Street from Class 2 residential to Class 1 business within Lima, Allen County, Ohio. The petition is for new retail construction. This petition is initiated by Lima DOHP XI LLC and has been endorsed by the City Planning Commission. Any person desiring to be heard on the said matter may do so at the time and place herein specified. The reports, maps, and other documents pertaining to the above request are on file in the office of the Clerk of Council and are open to public inspection.
Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak to the issue of rezoning of 1020 West North Street from Class 2 residential to Class 1 business? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Linda, you'll have to be next.
All right.
He was first, yep.
All right, thank you.
Tim Volchko with Civil and Environmental Consultants, civil engineer for the project. My address is 1128 Hooverview Drive, Westerville, Ohio.
Okay.
I just want to give a brief overview.
Sir, Tim, could you state your last name again, please?
Volchko, V as in Victor, OLCHKO.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. 2 and 3 are kind of tied together, essentially the same project. So what we're looking for is the rezoning of the parcels, and then also the vacation of one of the alleys, the north-south piece of alleyway. these are the 8 parcels we're looking to develop, and then there's this existing alley that we're looking to vacate. And then this this alley was vacated in, I believe, 1973, so we're looking to build a Dollar General on this site with the rezoning and alley vacation approval.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Wolchko? Thank you very much. Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to speak to the issue of rezoning, excuse me, of 1020 West North Street from Class 2 residential to Class 1 business?
Myself.
Linda?
All right. Yeah, I'm Linda Mack, 108 East High, apartment 414, very bad shape, do the sewers. Here's something I've been seeing coming up quite a bit. Here's these businesses coming in, LLC, which I understand is limited liability corporations or something like that. And there's been a lot of that since about 10 years ago or so. There's a bunch of them did it, and some of them I thought were pretty honest. But if they're going to go in business and something happens, I think they ought to take the responsibility for what, not have limited liability so they can get out of something that's wrong that they've caused or something. So I don't know how this unlimited liability corporation stuff is, a lot of it coming up in town, and I think it's very questionable.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to speak to the issue of the rezoning of Class 2 residential to Class 1 business at 1020 West North Street? Please come forward, state your name. Mr. Smith, I guess we have your name and address.
David Smith, 515 West Ashwood, Lima, Ohio, and several other properties. I would ask the same question of the law director. As this is, thank you. Would you explain that to the county prosecutor? This will become apparent later.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Is there anybody else in the audience who wishes to speak to the question of rezoning of 1020 West North Street from Class 2 residential to Class 1 business? For the final call, is there anybody in the audience wishing to speak to the question of rezoning of 1020 West North Street from Class 2 residential to Class 1 business? Seeing none, we'll declare that public hearing closed. The next public hearing is on an alley vacation in the 1000 block of West North Street. I'll read the call.
Notice is hereby given that on the November 9th, 2015, at 7 p.m. in Council Chambers, 50 Town Square, Lima, Ohio, a public hearing will be held regarding vacation of a portion of unnamed alleys running north-south in the 1000 block of West North Street and running east-west between North Jameson and North Charles. The purpose of the vacations is to create a larger parcel for new construction. This proposal was initiated by Lima DOHP XI LLC, owner of the abutting property, and has been approved by the City Planning Commission. Any person desiring to be heard on said matter may do so at the time and place herein specified. The reports, maps, and other documents pertaining to the above request are on file in the office of the Clerk of Council and are open to public inspection.
Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak to the issue of vacation of the portion of unnamed alleys running north and south on the 1000 block of West North Street and running east and west between Jameson and North Charles? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Aloka Roy, 3014 Lakeshore Drive. I am here to point out an amendment that was done to this request. The alley running east-west, as Tim Wolchko just mentioned, was already vacated. And the staff report shows that it was vacated in by ordinance 231-71. So it is only one alley that we are vacating with this request, and that is the one running north-south from North Street.
Okay, so the east-west has already been
Was
vacated?
vacated in 1971.
Okay, very good. In looking at the ordinance, it also only addresses the north-south, the north-south alley. Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to speak to the issue of vacation of an alley in the 1000 block of West North Street? The final call. Is there anybody in the audience wishing to speak to the issue of vacation of a portion of unnamed alley running north and south in the 1000 block of West North Street and running east-west between North Jameson and North Charles? I have to mention it because it's in the call. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed. Next is there is no privilege of the floor. Consent calendar.
Mr. President,
Mr. Tevin.
I move that item A of the consent calendar be received, filed, and approved, and item B be received and filed.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive, file, and approve item A and to receive and file item B. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication 1.
From the Director of Community Development regarding legislation to place tax assessments.
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn.
I move that communication number 1, receive and file legislation of the night agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 1. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 2.
From the Director of Community Development regarding legislation to apply for the 2016 U.S. EPA Brownfield Grant.
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn.
I move that communication number 2, receive and file legislation of the night agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 2. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 3.
From the Finance Director regarding legislation for budget amendments.
Mr. President,
Mr. Tevin.
I move that communication number 3 be received and filed. Legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 3. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 4.
From the Deputy Director of Utilities regarding legislation to participate in a water line extension.
Mr. President,
Mr. McLean.
I move that communication number 4 be received and filed and authorize the law director to prepare any necessary legislation. Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 4 and to authorize the law director to prepare any necessary legislation. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 5.
From the Deputy Director of Utilities regarding legislation to amend Ordinance 4714.
Mr. President,
Mr. McLean.
I move that communication number 5 be received and filed. Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 5. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 6.
From the Mayor to reappoint Dr. Wilfred Ellis to the Allen County Board of Health.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Miles.
I move that communication number 6 be received and filed, and that the law director be authorized to prepare any necessary authorization if necessary.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive, file, and approve communication number 6 and to authorize any necessary legislation. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 7.
From Chief Martin regarding legislation to enter into a contract with Creative Microsystems, Inc.
Mr. President,
Mr. Gordon.
I move that communication number 7 be received and filed. Legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 7. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 8.
From the City Engineer regarding legislation to enter into a consent agreement with ODOT.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams.
I move that communication number 8 be received and filed. Legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 8. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 9.
From the Director of Public Works regarding legislation to apply for a grant through the Johnny Appleseed Cooperative Parks.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams.
I move that communication number 9 be received and filed. Legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 9. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The Motion carries. Communication number 10.
From the Deputy Director of Utilities and Director of Public Works requesting legislation to enter into easement agreements with Marathon Pipeline.
Mr. President,
Mr. McLean.
I move that communication number 10 be received and filed and authorize the law director to prepare any necessary legislation.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 10 and to authorize the law director to prepare any necessary legislation. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 11.
From the Deputy Director of Public Works requesting legislation to purchase through state discount pricing.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams?
I move that communication number 11 be received and filed, and the law director be authorized to prepare any necessary legislation.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 11 and to authorize the law director to prepare any necessary legislation. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Next, we have reports of officials. Amy Odom regarding the annual performance CAPER report.
Mr. President, council members, and those assembled, I just wanted to take a very brief moment to make the community aware that our annual report on performance on our federal funding that is administered through the Department of Community Development, which is the CDBG funds and our home funds, is now available. We're required to make this report on the use of these funds in terms of the performance, as well as the funds expended each year, and it has to go on public review for 15 days. It's a fairly lengthy report. I've provided council with basically the crib notes, or the short version, showing the dollar amounts and the performance in each of the categories that were funded last year. This full report is available tomorrow morning on the city's website, on the community development site, and also is available at the Department of Community Development and at the public library. Overall, I think it's good news once again this year. Performance was good. In some areas, in terms of our home dollars, we got a bit of a late start because last year, if you remember, they released our funds late. The home funds were released at a later date than the CDBG funds were. But overall, our programs continue to perform very well. I wanted to also share with you another report that I'm quite proud, and I'm very proud of our staff, and I'm very proud of our housing partners, to announce that in our quarterly Home Snapshot, which is a report that is how well we're doing on our administration of our housing dollars, Lima ranks number 3 in the state against the 22 different other communities using home dollars, and we actually rate 30th nationally in terms of the efficiency of our administration. So I wanted to share that good news, and I wanted to thank our partners, which would be LACA. I'd like to thank Lima, New Lima Housing for the Future, and also our staff, who work very hard to make sure mortgage assistance and home repair, as well as new construction dollars, are made available. So that's all I really had to say on that. But if you have any further questions on this report, I'd be happy to answer that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is from the Ohio State University, the Vacant Land Study Project.
Good evening, Mr. President, council members. I'm Fabio Leite, the Associate Dean at the Lima campus of Ohio State University. I'm here to report on the updates of the project Mr. President just mentioned. This is a project that we have been able to leverage the resources of the Ohio State University, the Columbus campus, with our campus in partnership with the City of Lima, which we were very grateful for. This effort came from the vision of Dean Gilbert to invest in some service learning-based opportunities for our students. And we have had a successful first mapping of some vacant lots in Lima, in which we paired some undergraduate students on our campus with graduate students from the Columbus campus. And it's my pleasure to have here with me Professor Mazakers, who will update the council on what we have been able to accomplish so far with the project.
Mr. President, City Council members, my name is Thijs van Massakers. I'm an assistant professor of city and regional planning at Ohio State University in Columbus. And together with Professor Boswell, who's back there, and Professor Sheremy, who could not be here today, recently started a two-year research project on vacant land reuse in Lima. This project is funded by the Ohio State University's Office of Outreach and Engagement through a two-year competitive grant that we received in the summer. The basic idea of the research project is to gather additional information on the current status and the types of amenities that are available on vacant and underutilized parcels in Lima, Ohio, and then pair that with an active interview exercise in which we actively reach out to organizations and individuals in Lima and ask them what types of vacant parcels they may be interested in, given the types of activities that these organizations engage in. So these are the type of semi-structured interviews that scholars quite often conduct. And then what we do on the back end of those interviews is we actually produce maps which seek to connect specific organizational ideas and goals to individual or multiple vacant parcels in the city of Lima. So for each organization or entity that we talk to, we produce a map that shows a set of vacant parcels or underutilized parcels in Lima that this organization might be interested in. The second phase, after this data gathering phase of the research project, will then be to invite subsets of these organizations and entities that we speak to meetings to start talking about specific clusters of vacant parcels and whether or not these folks might be interested in working together on revitalizing or reutilizing those vacant parcels. So far, and what we do is we only use publicly accessible information on these parcels, and of course we request organizations' participation, but they're obviously free to ignore us altogether or refuse participation. We have started the interview phase and the data gathering phase. We hope to produce the first set of maps later this semester, which is sort of November, December, and then we hope to bring together a or multiple groups of these stakeholders, hopefully in the spring of this year. And then the second year of the research project, we will bring together students in city and regional planning and landscape architecture and architecture in the Knowlton School at Ohio State to develop some initial ideas and design ideas for how these parcels might be able to be reutilized. This type of research project is perhaps somewhat uncommon because we are actively reaching out to organizations, but it's based on work that we've been conducting in New Orleans as a research team over the last year in the context of a design competition that we participated in last year. So I have a business card and a request for all of you. If you know of organizations or individuals who might be interested in participating in this study, we would gladly speak to them and try to record some of their interests and goals and see if we can connect those to specific parcels in the city. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now or at a later stage in a one-on-one. So may I approach to give you my business cards?
Thank you.
Apologize, I did not bring it up.
Thank you.
Yeah, I need it for the name. I
Yeah.
can't give it away. You need it for your
Sorry,
name.
I'm happy to write down.
Oh, I can collect it from my colleagues.
Pass that
They
around.
like to share.
Pass that around for Ann.
Thank you.
Pass it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next is ordinance 2/2015.
Levying special assessments for property maintenance code charges on premises in the city of Lima, Ohio.
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn?
I move that ordinance 2/2015 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 2/2015 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? Will have the clerk call the roll?
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Miss Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 2/2015 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 2/2115.
Amending the 2015 annual budget.
Mr. President,
Mr. Tevin?
I move that ordinance 2/2115 be passed on its first reading.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 2/2115 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? We'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Miss Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 221-15 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 222-15.
Authorizing the appointment of Sean Carpenter to the Lima Civil Service Board.
Mr. President,
Mr. Lowe.
I move that ordinance 222-15 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 222-15 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? We'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Miss Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 222-15 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 223-15.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with the Lima Allen County Convention and Visitors Bureau using funds from the hotel motel tax.
Mr. President,
Mr. Lowe.
I move that ordinance 223-15 be passed on its first reading.
Second. The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 223-15 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Miss Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 223-15 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 224-15.
Authorizing the mayor to apply for, accept, and administer funds from the U.S. EPA Brownfield Coalition Assessment Grant Program.
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn.
I move that ordinance 224-15 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 224-15 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? We'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Miss Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 224-15 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 225-15.
Authorizing the mayor to accept a donation of services and materials from Blacktop Ceiling.
Mr. President,
Miss Adams?
I move that ordinance number 225-15 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 225-15 on its first reading. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President.
Mr. McLean?
I want to personally thank this Blacktop Ceiling Incorporated because they've done this over the last few years. It's a donation that they gave to the city of sealing some of the parking lots, and they've done this before, and I don't know if they get to the notoriety they need, but I tell you, it really is appreciated. It's an expense that the city doesn't have to outlay, and they do a very good job, and we're very thankful for that. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Glenn?
Yes, I want to echo the same thing that Sam said, but we do appreciate it so much. Like Sam said, he don't get that enough appreciation when you're using your hometown pride and giving back to the city. And it's fantastic to see them go in the park and take care of that and no expenses from the city. And just hope we have more people doing that. And it's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn. Is there any further discussion? We'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Miss Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 225-15 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 226-15.
Authorizing the mayor to give consent to the Ohio Department of Transportation for improvements to State Route 65 as part of the All SR 65 8.02 PID 87188 project.
Mr. President,
Miss Adams?
I move that ordinance 226-15 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 226-15 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? We'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Miss Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 226-15 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 227-15.
Authorizing the mayor to apply for, accept, and administer funds from the Johnny Appleseed Metropolitan Park District 2016 Cooperative Park Improvement Grant Program.
Mr. President,
Miss Adams?
I move that ordinance 227-15 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 227-15 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Miss Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 22715 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 22815.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Creative Microsystems, Inc.
Mr. President,
Mr. Gordon.
I move that ordinance 22815 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion on the second is to pass ordinance 22815 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? Will have the clerk call the roll?
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Miss Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 22815 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 22915.
Amending ordinance 4714.
Mr. President,
Mr. McLean.
I move that ordinance 22915 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion on the second is to pass ordinance 22915 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? Will have the clerk call the roll?
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Miss Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 22915 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 23015.
Amending the city zoning map from Class 3 residential to office for 6 parcels located on West Market Street in the city of Lima is herein described.
Mr. President,
Mr. Tevin.
I move that ordinance 23015 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
Motion the second is to pass ordinance 23015 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? All those, have to have the clerk call the roll. Sorry.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Miss Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 23015 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 23115.
Amending the city zoning map from Class 2 residential to Class 1 business for 3 parcels located at 1020 West North Street in the city of Lima is herein described.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Miles.
I move that ordinance number 23115 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion on the second is to pass ordinance 23115 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Miss Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 23115 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 23215.
Vacating a portion of an unnamed alley located in the 1000 block of West North Street.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Miles.
I move that ordinance number 23215 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion on the second is to pass ordinance 23215 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Miss Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 23215 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Miscellaneous business, Mr. Glenn.
Yes, I got a couple things here. First, I wish everyone a happy Veterans Day. The American Legion on Metcalf Street will be having a salute to the veterans, and also they'll be giving away free food, so we got to see a lot of folks to come out for that. That started at 9 a.m., and they will be having a guest speaker. Usually I always have a colonel at the tank plant to be there. Okay. Also, we are having our annual 6th Ward Person of the Year. We'll be having that dinner. It will be at Beer Barrel Market Street on the 12th, Thursday the 12th at 7 p.m. And the Neighborhood Association will be taking reservations. We'll cut the reservation off Tuesday. We also had over 300 people sign up for turkeys this past weekend, and we're going to continue going at it, and the cutoff day is tomorrow for that. This past weekend, we've had an opportunity to bring in some great counselors. Dave from Cincinnati, Tim from Columbus Grove, and Steve from Hillsborough, Ohio. They had an opportunity to go around and we had an opportunity to go around to different parts of the city. That some of the parents had called about their kids was involved with drugs, And these guys had opportunity to talk to them and give them hope. Also, I appreciate the family that fed them and the family that housed them. And we appreciate them so much to come to town and taking part in that. They gave us a call when they wanted to know about the Say No to Heroin Wall. And they brought some literature down, how they can help with housing, help with creating jobs. You know, we had opportunity to watch TV this evening, how they are working on anybody who's on drugs, anything like that. Job and Family Service working on getting them employed. What's some of the ways we can work on getting them employed, getting them jobs and keeping them clean. So this is some of the things that these guys came down to do. And I appreciate their time and effort. Also, we are working very hard on helping people get the leaves out. And I know they're in the 4th Ward right now, but they will be in the 6th Ward next week, but we want to make sure that we get this done. And we got some volunteers helping out this weekend coming and getting your leaves pushed up to the front. And also, we are working on a website, and I'm very happy about that. One of the councilors gave us opportunity for that. This website in the 6th Ward will bring in, let you know the babysitters. You like to have a garage sale, but we'll be able to hit folks in the area that have computers and stuff in their home to notify them. Also, they'll be able to notify me of some of the things they want to get done in their area, you know, or drug houses, different things like that. But we will be talking about that at a particular date. We should have this up and running the next 2 to 3 weeks. And as some of the neighborhoods are using this, one of the neighborhood people went on the conference and they was talking about how they bring this website to your neighborhood. And it's called Next Door 4th Street Take Back website. So we do have a 4th Street in that area, and we're going to make sure we got everybody involved in it. They need to be involved in it. They can get in contact with different folks, and different references will be involved in that. And that'll be it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Glenn. Mrs. Miles?
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to say a sincere thank you to Mike Capella and his utility department staff. I had a constituent in my area that she says she's been dealing with this problem, she says, for 2 years here. And Mike has been very, very helpful in helping. It was her sewer cover. She lives on Jameson. You know how much traffic there is on Jameson. And every time that trucks or cars would cross over this sewer cover, it would go kapoop, kapoop, kapoop. And she said that she could hear it all through her house, you know. And she said it was keeping her up at night, and she was complaining. And Mike tried several fixes. He and the staff tried several fixes to get it to work, but it seemed like it wasn't working, that it was still causing problems. And every morning, religiously at 8:30, I got a call from her, you know, saying she couldn't sleep last night, and is there anything I can do to get it worked out? And I talked to Mike several times about it, he and his staff here, and he was very generous. He was very helpful in trying to try various things here to keep that seal tight so that this woman could sleep at night. And so this afternoon, lo and behold, I get a call from her, and it's not even 8:30 in the morning, but it's this afternoon, and she says that they were out today, and she watched them put another seal in the sewer cover. And she says that after they left, she sat there on her porch and watched the cars and the trucks go by. She says she did not hear anything. And so I just want to say, Mike, it's been a long haul. It's been a long haul, but I think we finally have her satisfied here.
Great.
And I just want to say I appreciate it, because he could have very easily said, well, I've tried this and I've tried that, but I said, Mike, let's try something else here. And he was very willing to do that, and I really, really appreciate it, because, you know, when our constituents are happy, they talk very nicely about Lima City, because she wasn't talking very good about Lima City at first here. And so I had to restore in her, you know, the faith in our city, and that we will try to do all we can to help out. And so again, to Mike and the utility department staff, I so appreciate you and all your efforts. Also, I want to say thank you to an event that was held on November the 5th here. And there was a request that went out for the men in the community to come out and just be at the school, to kind of welcome the kids into the schools. And this was done at 4 different Lima City schools here. And there was an individual in town that put out the word, hey, you know, I just want to have the men there, because so many of the children do not have male figures in their lives. And so the word went out, and on November the 5th, if you could have been at all 4 of those schools, you would have been truly, truly blessed. These men came out, and as the kids were getting off of the school bus, they were out there giving them high fives and say, hey, you know, have a great day, and just giving them hope for the day. And you should have seen the faces of those kids here. And it was such a delight. And I saw people on this Facebook page and on the news, and there were people from all walks of life. I mean, there were police officers, there was businessmen, there were just people from all. It wasn't just a one race thing. It was everybody coming together. And you know how I always talk about unity in our community. On that particular day, November 5th, early in the morning, from 7:15 to 7:40 in the morning, if you could have came in and saw the presence of these men out there in front of the schools, giving those kids the high five, seeing the smile on those kids' face, I mean, it was a picture to behold, you know. And I really appreciate those who organized this year, because this is what it's going to take in our community. It's going to take everybody working together for us to be the city that we can and can be here. And so I really appreciate these guys, because I saw people in those pictures, I'm saying like, wow, he came out? He came out? You know, and it really just warmed my heart. And so again, I say thank you to all those, the police officers, you know, they were very much represented. If you saw the paper on Sunday, where you saw, you know, everyone holding hands and they were praying. Isn't that wonderful for us to come together, no matter who we are, no matter where we're from, for us to stand there and hold hands and to pray. And so that was a wonderful thing. And I just hope that those type of initiatives will continue in our community, that we all come together and realize that we're all here to make our city better. We're here for us to prosper, and that there should be no division. There should be no division. We all should come together, united for one particular reason, and that is to make Lima the best city that it can be. And so again, thanks to all the efforts for those who came out, for those who were involved in the event, and I really hope that we can see more of that coming together and being as one, so that we can prosper as a city. Lastly, I'd like to say the Westgate Neighborhood Association will have their neighborhood meeting on November the 15th at 6:30 p.m. The meetings are held at the Chamberlain Huckery Funeral Home, and the speaker for the month of November will be Alicia, I hope I didn't mess her name up, Alicia Bush, and she's the director for Elder Care Victim Ministry. And so again, for those of you who want to come out and hear her talk about the problems that we're having with elder care and some of the abuse that they're going through here, this is a ministry that she has started. And again, this is at Westgate Neighborhood Association on November the 15th at 6:30 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Miles. Mr. Gordon?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. One thing, last week, I asked to have an issue put into a committee, the vicious dog issue. And I'd like to ask the Lima News to correct that, because they printed that the vicious dog issue would be next week, November 16th, and it's not. So I'd like to ask them to kind of correct that for me, because we have quite a full plate that night, and I really don't need that. We don't even have a date set for that issue. It's just in committee. So if they could correct that, I would be very thankful. And then the only other thing I have is to remind people to be good to each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, November is filled with a couple of the best holidays that we can have. One's Thanksgiving, where we all sit around with our families and we give thanks and thanks for everything that we have. But, you know, we wouldn't have a lot of those things if it wasn't for a veteran. So on the 11th, if you're out and about, I know you're going to see some of the veterans out, just stop and say thanks. Not only say thanks, if you got a chance to buy them a cup of coffee or a meal, I'm sure they would appreciate it. Those guys risked their lives for our freedom. That means more to me than any Thanksgiving. So anybody that can see that on the 11th, please get out and thank a veteran for your freedom, and then on Thanksgiving, enjoy your families, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Mr. Lowe?
Nothing this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Mr. Tevin?
Nothing this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Tevin. Ms. Adams?
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I would like to call a Public Works Committee meeting on November 30th at 5:30 in these chambers. We'll be readdressing the design review issue. And hopefully we'll be coming to a close on that, to finalize it, to get it before council, hopefully before the end of the year. The other issue that was referred at the last meeting was, from Councilor Tebben, was the disease, dead trees issue on private property. We can start the discussion that evening on that issue. The other item I have is, I believe there's a mayor focus meeting next Wednesday, the 18th at 5 p.m. at the LACNIP Resource Center on West Spring Street. Please mark your calendars. It's a good time to
Health partners.
Yes, that Health Partners.
Oh, is it at Health Partners?
Yeah.
Okay. Note I had was Resource Center. At the Health Partners on 8th Street, right? Okay. That's a beautiful facility. I went to their open house a couple weeks ago. Plenty of room, please. It'd be a good opportunity to see that facility and how well it's grown and the great service they give to the community. And also, like I said, it'd be a great opportunity to meet not only the mayor, but their officials, directors of the departments, hear some projects, get some updates, and ask any questions or express any concerns. And usually there's a few counselors in attendance as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. The only thing I have this evening is I just want to echo the importance of Wednesday being Veterans Day. And if you can't be at one of the services that are going on, either at the Legion or the VFW Hall, then at the 11th hour, 11 minutes after, take a moment, pause, reflect on those that have given the ultimate sacrifice so that we have the rights and the freedoms that we enjoy today. Those who have given the ultimate sacrifice and those that are currently serving. And it doesn't take much to just say thanks, but you'd be surprised how much it means to a veteran. So, thank you. There's nothing further.
Mr. President, I move that Lima City Council adjourn until November 23rd at 7 p.m. in these chambers.
Second.
The motion on the second is the Lima City Council will adjourn until November 23rd at 7 p.m. in these chambers. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the motion carries and we are adjourned.